All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is clear that there's been a lot of news regarding, of course, Ciaccona that has hit Wuthering Waves Twitter. And of course, when it comes to a new unit, when it comes to value, something we always have to talk about is their 5-star signature weapon. And boy, oh boy, do I have a lot of things to say about this one, Woodland Aria. But before we dive into the details, if you'd like to pull Ciaccona or her weapon and you're looking to maybe spend some money on some Lunite, you'd probably like to save some cash. LD Shop is a fantastic way of doing that, and I'll show you exactly why. LDShop.gg gives you access to huge discounts on pretty much anything you can buy in a ton of games. But let's click on Woowa for now. The monthly pass? Usually it's $5 dues, but on LD Shop, it'll be much less. What a deal! To claim one of these discounts, just select the item you're looking for and click Top Up to submit your payment. You'll need your Kuro linked account email, password, and username. This might seem a bit off, but remember that LD Shop already works with sensitive account information with their emulator, LD Player, so you can trust them for their services. They also have excellent reviews on Trustpilot. If you created an account with Gmail or Facebook, use the directions in the Top Up menu to link your account to an email. After finalizing your payment info, wait a couple of minutes and your items will be on your account. New users can get a 10% discount and an additional 5% using my sponsored link, and first-time top-up bonuses are available as well. That means you can get some big discounts. Spending $80 or more will net you a VIP membership, which can get you a free 30-day Lunite subscription. So try LD Shop today. So with that, let's go ahead, let's get right on into it and have a bit of an analysis of this weapon and how it's going to work on Ciaccona and potentially some other users on the roster. So with that, let's go right ahead. Let's start breaking it down, starting with its base stats. And boy, oh boy, am I excited with these base stats. So we got Woodland Aria. All things exist within lines that nobody cares. The base stats are going to be 500 attack. And you know what 500 attack means? It means that the other stat of this weapon is going to be massive and a whopping 36% critical rate. And I'm going to be honest here, ladies and gentlemen, this is a really important stat breakdown for a character like Ciaccona to have on her signature because of one reason. And I'm going to show you all right now. If you've taken a look at Ciaccona's stat upgrades in Crossing Stars, what you might have noticed is that she has critical damage nodes on the left and right hand sides of her tree. And what this means is that she's naturally going to be a lot harder to build than some other units in the game, especially when it comes to balancing critical rate. This means that functionally, she's going to have a 5% critical rate at base and no other way to improve it other than her weapon and her echo subs. And so this is the thing. I have actually been an individual that's been pre-farming for Ciaccona on Gusts of Welkin, and this is what I have to show you. I actually have Alto equipping all of her stuff right now. You're gonna be able to see, like, my Gust of Welkin is over here. We got critical damage, arrow damage, blah blah blah, all that stuff, right? And this is the thing with Static Mist. If I put Static Mist onto her, this is what my critical rate looks like. Yeah, that's fucking low. Yeah, that's dog shit. And you'll notice that Alto's actually an appropriate character to do comparisons on, because Alto does not have critical damage or critical rate nodes on his tree, just like Ciaccona. And so with Static Mist and a full set of echoes that have crit rate, I got some pretty bad rolls, right? I'm only going to have 63.8% crit rate, which is awful. And that's because this weapon gets 24.3%. But if I go up to 36%, right? If I go up to 36% crit rate, like what's on the base stat over here, right? This 63.8% suddenly becomes 75.8. And that's a lot better. I'm obviously going to take some hits to my attack because of, you know, what I'm naturally going to be doing. But that's going to become 75.8%. And that is a lot better. And that means that, especially when it comes to, like, balancing your stats on a set like this, it's going to make it a lot better, a lot easier, and you won't need to have as much echo grinding to get, like, those perfect crit rate, critical damage subs to get a good ratio. And you'll need to farm less. You'll be able to actually save quite significantly on your echo resources. So that's something really big to keep in mind, and that's just how important a base stat is, because with Ciaccona having a weapon with this much critical rate, it's kind of natural that you're going to want a critical damage forecast to make sure that your ratios are still good. And this is the thing when it comes to Ciaccona in particular. Guys, the character actually does quite a lot of damage. And some people might not believe me when I say that, but this is the literal proof. At level 1, her liberation literally nukes for 553%. That's level 1 on the ability. I think this goes up to like 1,000 or gets really close to 1,000 at level 10. And that's just from casting it. So that's something to keep in mind as well. This character actually has some pretty big motion values on quite a few of the abilities, even has some self buffs to stuff like her Forte circuit built into her kit. So it's not like this character is doing like no damage at all like Confession Phoebe is on the Zani teams. They're actually working pretty hard. So next up, let's get right on into the weapon effect, because we've already talked about how important these base stats are and the impact it has on your building. Now let's see what she's got over here. The weapon skill is going to be called Lingering Summer Tune. We're only going to be looking at synchronization rank 1. And the first part of this weapon effect is attack is increased by 12%, which is a little bit unfortunate because that's definitely not as good as having a 12% general attribute damage bonus like we see on other signatures. But usually what offsets a 12% increase in attack is a much stronger weapon effect. So let's take a look at what the second part of this weapon effect is. Inflicting arrow erosion on the target gives a 24% arrow damage bonus for 10 seconds. And as you can see throughout Ciaccona's kit, she kind of inflicts arrow erosion on almost every single attack. Basic attack stage 4 inflicts 1 stack of arrow erosion. Resonance skill, move a certain distance, deal arrow damage, and inflict 1 stack of arrow erosion. Resonance liberation, inflict arrow erosion when using the green tonic or hitting the green QTE up to 20 times. And then on her Forte circuit, inflict 1 stack of arrow erosion. The character basically does it on pretty much every single attack in her kit, and the end result means that you should have near permanent uptime on this 24% arrow damage bonus. However, there is a second part. This arrow damage bonus over here is only a personal buff. This weapon actually is support for arrow teams as well. Hitting targets with arrow erosion on them reduces their arrow resistance by 10% for 20 seconds, and effects of the same name cannot be stacked. And so what this essentially means, ladies and gentlemen, is that you can just go ahead and you can become one of the biggest arrow supporters in the game, having this weapon equipped and hitting the target with arrow erosion. You might think that reducing arrow resistance by 10% isn't that crazy, but this is the thing. If you go ahead, you walk on over into the TOA, and you take a look at how some of the buffs actually work, right? You will notice something. In the middle tower, you always have this whole enemy spectral resistance and arrow resistance are decreased by 10%, and their other resistances are increased by 10%. A 10% resistance reduction is essentially almost the same as a 30% increase in damage. And the more resistance reductions you actually have, I believe the more impactful they actually are in the first place. And so having like 20% arrow resistance is a lot better, right, than having like 60, or it's a lot better than having like 60% arrow damage bonus. And so the more you're able to stack this up, the stronger the overall effects are. And the end result is that arrow resistance reduction, which is on the weapon, is one of the greatest ways you can actually increase your team's damage. You'll notice if you played in like version 1.0 or like the earlier versions of the game, you never had this resistance reduction. It would just be a 30% damage bonus. And, you know, functionally, they're quite similar. And that also means this is a very, very, very powerful buff, and it should be doing a lot for you when it comes to your team rotations, and should actually give Ciaccona a lot of potential use cases, even outside of like purely arrow erosion teams. This, if she's equipped with this weapon, I genuinely believe that she becomes kind of like a overall arrow damage buffer, because she can self-apply her own erosion, which is great in itself. She also amplifies erosion damage, and with this weapon too, she's decreasing arrow resistance, not even necessarily only to arrow erosion damage. And that means that if you're deciding, you know what, maybe I want to use a character like either like my John Shin or like my Jian, or God forbid even my Alto, they're all gonna benefit from having Ciaccona on their team, because Ciaccona provides 24% arrow damage bonus on her basic attacks when she's in her solo concert stage, and then also that arrow resistance reduction. So there's a lot of buffing going on that should actually give her a lot of use cases outside of what many are considering her best in slot team, which is going to be more arrow erosion damage focused. So overall, I would say this weapon, specifically when it comes to Ciaccona, should actually make her a lot more multi-rolled than a lot of people might think. And of course, it also makes her much easier to actually build and balance out the stats for. However, it's time to talk about the elephant in the room when it comes to this weapon and when it comes to this unit in particular. And that is the fact that this weapon is one of the most specific ones in the game. I'm going to be entirely honest with you. I don't really know who else on the roster can actually use this thing. A, they have to be able to inflict arrow erosion, and B, they also have to be like an arrow unit to receive any of the benefits, like the arrow damage bonus, which if you're not an arrow unit, this does absolutely nothing for you, and you also want to benefit from the arrow erosion reduction as well. The only use case I could potentially see on the roster is this. Mortefi equips this weapon, but Ciaccona's on his team. And so Ciaccona has the arrow erosion, she applies it, it's there, and then Mortefi actually goes ahead, shoots the enemy, and then applies that arrow resistance reduction. And so he benefits from nothing except the 12% attack, but he is applying, that debuffing on the enemy to amplify the team's overall damage. And I guess this means that maybe you put a more damaging weapon on Ciaccona, but there's not really any other options. And it would probably just be better for Ciaccona and Mortefi to be on the same team, and for the signature to just be on Ciaccona so that she actually gets the damage bonus, and then Mortefi's on Static Mist so that he can buff Gian via an outro skill. So even in the one situation where it might actually do something and it might actually work, it seems overall very, very, very pointless. And so I would say, in terms of overall value, yes, this weapon will give Ciaccona a lot more rolls and make her significantly stronger outside of like her best in slot arrow erosion teams, but it is quite literally only usable on Ciaccona herself, and for pretty much every other pistol user in the game, you're going to be better with either Static Mist or The Last Dance. There's pretty much no situation where it's going to outperform either of these two weapons when it comes to either personal damage or buffing outside of arrow teams. And Ciaccona's the only character who's able to get the benefits of like the personal damage buffs from the arrow damage bonus and the buffing from the arrow resistance reduction. So it's kind of just like, I would say it's a little bit worrisome. It's definitely a weapon where you only want to get it if you really want Ciaccona to be a lot stronger. But if you're not pulling Ciaccona, this is definitely not a weapon you ever want to get close to. And even if you do pull Ciaccona, you have to factor in, that's a lot of pulls that I'm allocating for a weapon. Do I want it to be allocated to a weapon this niche that can't be used on pretty much any other unit on the roster? And if you're okay with fulfilling both of those conditions, then I'd say go for it, right? You'll get a lot of mileage out of it. Your Ciaccona and every single one of your Ciaccona teams will be a lot stronger for you having pulled this weapon. But if that's not necessarily something you want to do, or that's not something that you're going to get a lot of value out of, then it might be better to just save these pulls for another unit, or B, I don't know, like anything else, like anything else on the roster. But the last thing that I do want to mention is that specifically, if you aren't pulling this weapon, Ciaccona still has some great overall options. Because let's be honest here, Static Mist is still going to be a solid weapon, regardless of whether or not you pull hers. Because it's still going to come in with that very great base attack, that very, relatively high crit rate, though as you saw from my build, it can be hard to balance, and built-in ER. You have to realize how important having built-in ER is on a weapon like this. Because, let's be honest here, Ciaccona's Resonance Liberation costs 125. And most characters that have a 125 cost Liberation need around 130% ER to have their Liberation every single time you want it. And what that means is that Ciaccona could have very, very big difficulties managing the uptime on her Liberation if you don't have over 130% ER on her. And with her weapon giving none, that could be a little bit rough. But thankfully, Static Mist is over here. And with the weapon at R3, you're seeing I have 19.2% ER. And that means I functionally only need like 1 or 2 ER subs to get it all done. And this means that Static Mist, on the other hand, can also be a weapon that makes your ER or your substat hunting on your echoes a lot easier. Much like how her weapon makes crit rate balancing a lot easier, this weapon makes your ER balancing a lot easier. So that's something to keep in mind as well, because we've been doing a lot of shilling for her weapon, but we do have to talk about some of its downsides as well, and the benefits of a standard weapon like Static Mist. So that's also something to keep in mind. So I'll kind of give like my take and what I'm gonna do when it comes to this weapon. I'm gonna pull it, and the reason that I'm gonna pull it is not because of its weapon effect, or its specificity, or its big buffs. I'm gonna pull it because it has 36% crit rate, and I don't want to farm any more Gusts of Welkin Echoes. Yeah, that's gonna be the reason why I pull it, because I am absolutely done farming that fucking Sonata set, and I don't want to have my final build with crit rate on every single echo only in there with like 63.6% crit rate. That shit is pathetic. And so pulling this weapon is like a shortcut that I can do to stop farming that godforsaken set, and I think that's just what I'm going to do. That's how impactful having a 36% crit rate weapon actually is on you know, a lot of things on your account. And so this is going to make my Ciaccona a lot easier to build. So that's why I'm going to pull it, because holy moly, have I exhausted like 2,000, 3,000 tuners on that set, and I still don't have like fucking, I still have some pretty dog shit echoes. And so hopefully this is like a good stopgap that'll, you know, make me want to stop pulling my hair out every time I end up doing that Gusts of Welkin Tacit Field. So yeah, that'll be that for me. Hopefully this overview was helpful for all of you, and gave you some more insight as to the value of this weapon and whether or not it's actually worth the pulls on your account. So with that, let me know what you all think. Peace.